About 15 years ago, somewhere between Detroit, Michigan, and Seneca Falls, New York, the idea to start a music website arose. What began as an independent music rag blossomed into a boutique music collective comprised of writers, photographers, artists, and content creators. What follows is a collection of stories from just a small but essential core group of contributors who've shared their passion through countless galleries, articles, and interviews. Over the course of several years and thousands of miles, these are our stories. A very special thanks to a handful of our favorite bands for the use of their songs for this episode. Here are the songs in the order in which they appear. Mo, Rebubula, Umphrey's McGee, All in Time, Drunken Hearts, Goes to Show, Fruition, recorded live in studio for MusicMarauders, At the End of the Day, and Wild as the Night, and Lotus, Umbilical Moonrise. Our theme song was composed by Narayam Padmanabha.
I think going back to the very beginning, there was one other buddy of yours from back home that used to do some stuff with you. What the fuck was his name?
Greg?
Oh, Greg. Fucking Greg. But he was a good editor. I remember early on, he was like helping us out, doing the damn thing. And at some point, not too very far into it, it was just me and you for like a long time.
I don't even know if you know this. In the beginning, in Ann Arbor, myself and a guy named Zach started a blog together where we shared music, and then Greg came along. But I would mention one other person that I think was around just prior to you, and he might have been our first like long-term contributor, and that would be Scott Shrader out in North Carolina, out in Nashville.
Maybe he gets the title of senior contributor then. I've been telling people for years. Maybe I'm the senior front range contributor.
Here's what I remember. When I came to Colorado, you were the first person that jumped on. And then at that point, it really started to take shape and feel kind of, I don't want to say official when we're talking about MusicMarauders, but...
Dear Lord.
Yeah, no, but it felt like it was something. It felt like the wheels started turning when you hopped on.
My name is Scott Shrader, and I have been contributing to MusicMarauders since 2010.
think a good starting place for this conversation is Jambase.
Yep.
Scott and I met on Jambase in the forums. What was your experience on Jambase?
It was a time killer for me, but it became a way that I discovered music and connected with other people who were into the same thing.
The positive takeaway for me is I met the majority of my best friends on there. I met Murray, who introduced me to my wife. I met you, and it was a moment at my wedding when I was standing there looking around, and there was like a bunch of people from Jambase there, which is a strange thing to say out loud.
My best friend, we also met on Jambase when we both lived in Greenville, and our wives are best friends. We ride bikes together on a weekly basis, and actually got asked yesterday how we met, and internet friends, normal thing.
I guess it is now.
This is Nicholas Stock, and I'm MusicMarauders' senior Colorado contributor.
Circa 2011, I had started to kind of dip my toe in the old blogosphere, I started my little, it's now more of a photo archive than anything, but I started my little blog back in 2008. I was working at a company called Elastic Lab that was very much ahead of the curve when it came to social media and crowdsourcing and all that sort of stuff. It was a really interesting time to be working at a marketing agency like that, working sort of in their post-production house. But what I did during that time was a series of videos that I think if you dig hard enough on the internet, you can still find, called The Culture of Content Creation. It was sort of like a primer or application to become one of our contributors. We were crowdsourcing 500 videographers and producers across the country, and at a time when crowdsourcing wasn't really even a term. And we were doing videos for Honda and D Hicks and Mountain Dew and kind of that kind of stuff. So it was fun stuff to be a part of. So that got me kind of tuned into the whole blog world, and that this was a thing. I think when you talk about blogging, podcasting was starting to become a thing, in the 2010s, early 2010s and things like that. But up until that point, people were just sharing photos and writing on the internet and going into chat rooms and forums and just being, nerds about whatever they wanted to be nerds about. That's kind of where I started to drift out. And I think around the same time that I found MusicMarauders, I found Surrender to the Flow, God bless them, and I still write for them. So I found MusicMarauders, and I also found that really close to the time that I found your blog, or your whatever you want to call it, your publication, your online publication, I found out you were moving to Colorado. And it didn't take long for me to be like, all right, well, maybe this is somebody that I can at least partner up with and create some content with and getting, go to some shows. I don't even think originally it was never even about getting into shows, even though that's now what it's all become, is just being able to get into concerts or whatever for free. But back then it was just I'm going to this concert and I'm going to bring my Kodak Easy Share and I'm going to see what I can write about, man. I mean,
for me, it really was about getting into concerts for free initially. I mean, for sure there's passion behind it because it's not worth it to write for hours and hours to get a $20 ticket. But when I was living in upstate New York, which is where MusicMarauders got its name and it really took off in 2010, I was so fucking broke that when a $20 concert ticket would pop up, even in my mind at that time, it was almost impossible. It's man, that's food for a few days or jams for a few hours. And so I think out of that necessity of wanting to attend these shows and to experience these experiences, I realized that I could do that through writing and taking. I mean, if you look back at some of my photos, they're fucking terrible. At the time, though, they stood up. But initially, for me, it was about getting into shows for free and just having access to, I guess, as a kid, folks that I idolized. If you look back to 2010 when we started, MusicMarauders is just littered with interviews that I did with people who should not have done interviews with us, if we're being honest.
This is J-Man with MusicMarauders.com. I am here with Del McCurry. How you doing today, Del?
Pretty good. How are you, Jay?
I'm doing really well. It's a pleasure to talk to you. I have to say, you're one of my heroes, so this means a lot to me. It really does.
Appreciate that, yeah.
This is J-Man from MusicMarauders.com, here with Sam Bush. Sam, thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Hey, Jay, glad you weathered the storm.
Yeah, we got a little wet over at Bill Keith's teepee over there. So. This is J-Man from MusicMarauders.com, here with Ray White and Fareed Hawk. How are you guys?
fine, alive and well. On this side of the grass.
Awesome. That's a good thing. Yeah, absolutely.
That's the first thing.
This is J-Man from MusicMarauders.com, and it's my pleasure to once again be sitting here with Mr. Bernie Worrell. How are you, Bernie?
And I'm sitting here again with my brothers Justin.
How you doing, man?
Okay, man.
Good. First, let's talk jazz.
A camera was put in my hand at a very young age. I grew up doing sports photography with my parents' business. I used to do film, so I got to do that in high school and stuff.
You are the longest tenured Music Marauders contributor.
I don't think I started shooting for you guys till like 2012, but I think I did some reviews up to then, starting 2010?
Yeah, I mean, that's the year Music Marauders took shape.
Yeah.
Oh, man, that's crazy to reflect on. So you've been contributing to Music Marauders in some fashion for about 15 years.
Yeah, often. I mean, pretty steadily, off and on, but yeah.
What drew you to want to contribute to Music Marauders?
Honestly, the way you guys presented it at first, just being a grassroots kind of organization, because it started off you and Zach. Like, wasn't it called Head Stash or something like that? Yeah.
It was, yeah. We had a different blog for that, but that was the same premise. And I actually remember sitting in our shared apartment in Ann Arbor and on a couch, and Zach and I would just be putting out like string cheese links. And I remember getting slapped on the hand once because Zach put out Umphrey's soundboards, and their management reached right out to us real quick. You learn the process as you go, I guess.
Yeah. It was the aspect of that, like music fans creating music coverage. And I don't know, maybe I was naive, maybe I was young, but I really hadn't seen that yet or been exposed to it.
What was the beginning of that experience like for you when you started contributing to Music Marauders?
A lot of pressure at first, a lot of unneeded pressure. You don't really know what you're expected to do or expected to deliver that early on, I guess. And I was just learning. I started off shooting like friends' bands and stuff, and then I stumbled across you guys, and next thing I know, I'm standing in front of fucking like Jimmy Herring and Taj Mahal at like the venue I grew up going to, being able to like just shoot. Like, yeah, go ahead, do it, whatever.
My name's Kevin Hahn. I've been in Colorado, for 20 years now. And how I got into that whole scene was I had a very different appreciation for music and a different view of music growing up in high school. Grew up playing classical piano my entire life and really grew up on Motown and kind of, oldies music with my mom and dad. And then I got to high school and, in the 2000s, it was very emo rock and indie rock. So bands like Jack's Mannequin and Something Corporate. And my first big concert was Green Day. That was at the San Francisco Giants baseball stadium, and Boxcar Racer and Flogging Molly opened up for them.
What year was that?
2000, that would have been probably 2006, 2007. First time I ever smelled marijuana on a large scale. It was first time I ever came home and my mom was like, "Are you smoking dope?" And no, I was not at that time, Mom. But so then I came to CU Boulder for college, and the first band that I was introduced to as a freshman is a band that still holds a big part of my heart. And even though they've gone through some lineup changes, is Sound Tribe Sector 9, SCS 9. And my first Red Rocks concert was their show in 2007, probably, September or October, one of the first couple months of my college life or career at CU. And it absolutely blew my fucking mind. I did not know music like that existed. I did not know bands like that had light production and the insane amount of fandom. And if you remember at that time, Murph was, he was one of the biggest guys in jam band music at that time. So that's how I got into it. I quickly went from Sound Tribe into String Cheese Incident, turned into a big hippie hula hooping look, as we would call it in college. And that led me to the Grateful Dead, which now has led me to Fish and everything else.
How did you first hear about Music Marauders?
Facebook was, I don't want to say new when I was in college, but it was relatively the hot thing, 2003 to 2007. It was still relatively new on the scene. And a friend of mine, one of my freshman roommates, basically was like, "Hey, there's this guy who gives out free tickets on Facebook, and it's this company." No one really knew. So I followed you guys on Facebook, and it happened to be at the time when you were working with Pete Wall and selecting winners to send to the Desert Rock Music Festival in Moab, Utah. Pete picked my name out of a hat. But the first time you and I really, I would say, locked in our friendship was when you started doing shows at the Highland Tap in Berger. And you were presenting the Garrett Sayers Trio at that time, and you were working on the Low High Music Festival. So that's when I really started seeing like, oh, I could attach myself to this Wook and he can get me into free concerts. And I was like, I like this guy.
I feel used.
Yes. Yes, for sure.
I remember hanging out with you at Yarmony Grass, maybe 2011.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I believe I had a broken ankle at that time. And I remember specifically you and our good friend Murray rolling out. Someone had brought a keg because at that time you could do it's a bring your own beer fest, kind of bring your own beer festival, BYOB. And someone rolled out a keg onto the festival dirt floor and you guys had me sit on it because I had a broken ankle. So yeah, there was definitely some bonding experiences held at Rancho Del Rio. And I thank Andrew and that team for allowing us to do that for so many years.
This is Andrew McConathy from Drunken Hearts and Yarmony Music Festival.
The first time I heard about Yarmony Grass was I was at Gray Fox Bluegrass Festival. And I was backstage. I just met Tim Carbone and we did an interview. And after the interview, we were hanging out backstage, I think when the Del McCurry band was going on. But he was like, Jay, there's a fucking festival up in Colorado. You have to check it out. They have a fucking floating stage and it's right on the Colorado River. And he was all amped on this festival. And in my mind, it was just like kind of like this dream to me because I had spent limited time in Colorado, if any, at that point. And I imagined going out to this festival. The stars aligned and I ended up in Colorado at that time. And this was 2010. And I was just falling in love with my wife. And Murray and I were at the pinnacle of the front end of our friendship. And I ended up at Yarmony Grass. And it changed my life. It affected who I am as a human. My relationship with my wife and some of my best friends grew from those experiences. Yarmony's just been a really special thing for me. And I want to say thank you for that.
Well, you're very welcome. I'm not sure if everyone's experience has been like yours out there, but hopefully more than not.
I think of a couple of my best friends right now, and they met at Yarmony Grass, and they are now married.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, there's a deep history there for my community and my group of friends, so we're really grateful for that. But I think about all the times that Music Marauders has covered Yarmony Grass throughout the years and how receptive you've been to us as a publication. I just wanted to say thank you for that. I wanted to talk about kind of what your approach has been over the years to Yarmony and how challenging maybe that's been, especially in the setting of Rancho Del Rio, off-grid basically in Bond, Colorado.
The challenges at Rancho were always vast, whether it was advancing. Obviously, we're bringing in a lot of equipment and things like that, but for a long time, they didn't have cell service out there. Communication's tough. It's a rafting center. So the primary purpose of the people that live and work out there is to raft the Colorado River, which means you're not necessarily answering the phone or responding to an email, because you're out on the river. So communication was always challenging, but fencing, they don't have a lot of fencing and stuff like that. So to try to secure the area was always a challenge. Always a bunch of wooks trying to sneak in. Chemicals are involved out there. If I had a nickel for every naked person that tried to jump in the river at 6 a.m. after hula hooping with fire, you go out to Rancho and there's no law, which is why we liked it. But as you can imagine, we didn't take very long for us to be kicking ourselves because, that's why we liked it. Well, guess what? A lot of other people liked it for that too. I always called Rancho where outlaws go to die. They go out there because they want to be left alone and similar stuff. When you show up and the person is out there to avoid people like you, it becomes an issue. So there was always kind of this clashing of the locals who live there and work there, and then like our staff and us, not really our clientele necessarily, but I remember one year someone sabotaged the internet so the box office couldn't take online sales. I guess that was because we didn't give this. It was the guy who had the Wi-Fi router. I guess he asked for like 10 tickets and we gave him like 8. So he cut the Wi-Fi on us. Or then another fun tale was when we actually moved the main stage from Rancho to State Bridge in 2012, I want to say. And people, I received like hate mail about moving the stage to State Bridge. God forbid we saved $30,000 by using a stage that's 2 miles away that you can float to. Kind of unheard of. But anyways, so because even though all the people were still camping at Rancho and attending the show at State Bridge, and we still had a stage at Rancho, and again, everyone was camped at Rancho, but we moved it to State Bridge. And so an angry person, might have been an employee, we don't know, but someone who lived out there or frequented there decided that it would be fun to prank us by clogging the air outtake for the bathroom system at State Bridge, which basically makes all the toilets overflow. So they sabotaged our bathrooms, and we lost like half our bathrooms or something at State Bridge. And not only was that, but you can imagine it didn't smell good. So, I mean, total, we've had incredible instances of cooperation out there with them, and then the exact opposite. So, yeah, I mean, bringing in stage, sound, light, security, trying to secure the property, trying to communicate with the property, trying to control the people that live on the property. It was always a challenge.
What did you love about it?
I loved all those things. Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of me. I grew up out there. My parents owned the Yarmony Ranch, Yarmony Creek Ranch, which is just on the other side of Yarmony Mountain for many, many years while I was growing up. So Rancho and KK's has always felt like home to me. KK is like a surrogate mother to me. And, now that we've parted ways with Rancho, I'm sure that she and I will always be good. But, it's tricky.
So I interviewed KK at Rancho last Yarmony, and I have not found the format for which to include that conversation. So maybe this is that moment, and I'll just splice it in right here. She's got some really overtly sexual feedback about her food.
Oh, yeah. Well, my gal.
For everybody. Come and get it. KK.
KK, what's up?
All right, we're sitting at the center of the universe. Murray is just wrapping up his appetizer 4K. How was it today, Murray?
4K is always top notch.
What did you say about the sausage?
Sausage is bigger than usual.
KK, when did you start doing this? How many years ago? What are we looking at?
Knee-high to a grasshopper. 36 years ago. Oh my goodness sakers! I said that out loud.
You got the history last year, didn't you?
Did you think that this would come as far as it has come?
Never, because when I built this, I used seconds, and about 30 years ago, it started to fall apart. If you notice, the floor is awfully spongy back here. Awfully spongy. Because I use seconds. Whoever cut these brownies, man, I'll tell you what. Look at that big one.
Wow.
Can you handle that? Huh?
Look at him.
Can you handle that? Now,
he's gonna go brownie, and he's probably gonna go back to a 4K or a home wrecker afterwards.
I'm gonna have to, run up to the kitchen.
No rush,
when I get a chance, or you may have
No rush. We'll be here for the next 5 hours.
You may have to.
All right. So what's next on the list for you, Murray? What are you going to do for the entree?
Might go right to dessert and then back to entree later.
For dessert, are we thinking the Costco cookie that is being masqueraded as a homemade cookie in a cookie jar? Or are we thinking about the brownie with salt? Or the triple cherry pie?
Or maybe brownie with ice cream. Is the ice cream in season?
I got just barely enough.
For one order?
For one, maybe 2 orders.
That's a wonderful thing to hear.
Orgasmatronic experience?
Yep.
Hey, what is the Orgasmatronic?
That is 1 triple chocolate brownie.
Homemade
Vanilla bean ice cream, oh my. Jimmy's from the East Coast. They were imported, special from the East Coast. And a little drizzle of chocolate sauce. Whoa.
Whoa. Yeah, we're going to end up with a couple of those, I think.
Menus out front, guys. All right.
Hey, what's up, guys?
KK, what do you love about cooking for people and serving people?
I love when they're eating my food. I watch them and send all my love to them.
That's
You wanna know
beautiful.
my favorite part?
Yeah.
My favorite part is seeing the people's face when they tell them how much they owe. There goes the college fund.
Amen, Murray.
What was your first article for Music Marauders?
Oh God, I have to go back. I think it wasn't the Mo show because I looked back. I thought that was the one that I wrote up, but you wrote on.
And I
Music
think you were
Marauders.
contributing before we met. And so at the point when we met, I think you had already been writing, I want to say, for us. Maybe not.
Well, I think when we first started, too, another thing was that we were writing. It was like you were doing a series of things like, oh, tell me about fish, or let's write an article about widespread panic. So like going way, way back, I started writing like these sort of like foundational articles that were less review.
Like a band feature.
Yeah, and more like, hey, check these guys out.
Yeah, we used to do like band spotlights, and early on I had, let's say it was like Sunday Grateful Dead column, and we used to do a jazz column, world music stuff. I kind of miss the content that wasn't just show specific. I really love seeing album reviews and interviews.
It looks like I wrote up the Mo show. So photos by Carly, words by Nicholas Stock. So that I think that may have been the first thing I actually wrote for you guys.
Interesting.
Was up there to go see Orchestra because they opened up, and I'm a big fan of those guys. And obviously Mo, I mean, Mo's deep into my history, but
yeah, so I want to talk about that too. I think back through all of these like milestone moments. I think of us mucking it out in the pit at shows and coming up through some of those Grateful Dead themed bars, and then seeing each other at bigger shows and Red Rocks and things like that. But there's this milestone moment when I look back at your story, and that's when you became, what, the first summer camp counselor?
First ever, brother. First one. And they made a big fucking deal out of it the first year, I'll tell you that. Like,
so how did that come about? What year was that? And how
so
did that
that
come
again
about?
was 2011 was kind of a pivotal year in this whole like blogging and writing thing. Again, I met up with you that year and started writing for Music Marauders. I started writing for Friend of the Flow, originally just doing sort of fish show reviews.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I've been the beer columnist for them since, God, I want to say like 2014 or 15, man. I've been regurgitating the same drunken gibberish on that thread, but nobody really reads that because I put my address on there and never got a postcard. So find it, like it's out there. Shit. Anyway, they had a contest in 2011 that I actually was against. It boiled down. I mean, people from all over the country put in these videos, and I think if you search Summer Camp Counselor, you can still see some of mine still up there. And then you had to get votes online and generate interest at a time when social media 2.0 was still kind of a new concept.
So really what this video is supposed to be about is my qualifications to be the summer camp counselor. I do have them. This is what I do, not only professionally, but personally. And that's why I feel that I am the strongest candidate to be the summer camp counselor. So for real this time, vote for the fat guy.
So it was a cool contest crafted by Holly Brinkman, who wanted it to be the coolest job at the festival.
Unpaid.
Yeah, the coolest unpaid job at the festival. But I did get to go side stage for Mo, Umphrey's, and Widespread Panic. I had a private show at my campsite with all 5 members of Mo and Allie and JP from Cornmeal. And everyone was just hanging out. They were lit by golf carts in the middle. If you search Corn Mo, period, it's still out there, still on the webs. And it was just like all these beautiful moments. And it was the foundation for something now that's much, much bigger than me. There's like 25, I think, camp counselors, maybe 20 active camp counselors that are still kind of helping. There's a core of about 10 or 15 that they just will never get rid of. And a few people come and go. And then some people just hang on. Like I'm not really willing to like retire But I do have some projects that need to be wrapped up and a few things that are still floating around in the summer camp realm. I made a film, shot a film, and then edited the first hour and 6 minutes of it before, COVID fucked everything up. I was making a movie about it, I was doing this whole thing, and then, life, so. But anyway, so I have deep connections with summer camp, and I've been to 14 summer camp music festivals. Obviously, it's Mo's festival.
I've been to a handful of summer camps as well. I want to say it was like 2005, 6, 7, and 9 or 10 maybe. But man, that was a cool festival at its peak. It really helped to elevate some of the second and third tier jam bands that maybe didn't get the attention they deserve necessarily, and put them on the main stage. And then when you see Umphrey's and Mo and that kind of setting in those years with that kind of crowd and that kind of light rig and everything, it was just big. It was grandiose for the level of bands that were there. And I always
You're talking about Peoria, Illinois.
the Wook center of the country, man. I mean, it's just an easy place for everybody to go to,
Yeah, well, it's and so for it to go, I was there the first 6 years and moved out to Colorado and thought I'm good. I did it. I don't need to go back. There's plenty of festivals to branch out. Well, not really in Colorado, but you can get to other places from Denver. It's fine. But there's plenty of other festivals to go to, And so when they had that contest, I was like, I didn't think I would go back another 8 times, but. Summer camp's great, but it's not the easiest festival to do. You know what I mean? It's in the woods. You're going to haul your gear up there. You got to want it. And that's why the summer camp people that go year in and year out are, they're the dedicated faithful, man.
What were some of the events that kind of made you think to yourself, man, I want to keep doing this?
Probably some of the smaller bluegrass shows. For some reason, just I don't know. It's where I really saw the community, being in North Carolina. A lot of the shows, we have a venue out here, Pisgah Brewing. I would go see shows out there and see some of the photographers because I knew how to use a camera and I just didn't know how to get into the world. Seeing some of the smaller festivals kind of drew me in. Aiken Bluegrass being one. Yeah, just kind of the smaller, tighter knit groups. Being behind the camera at First Lock-In for Further and Trey was kind of fucking unreal. Standing next to Jay Blakesburg, shooting pictures, being like, well, how did I get here? What?
That's crazy. What was that festival like?
That was wild. That was the only time I went, was the first one, and it was fantastic. But I know it evolved over the years, but it was, it felt like an early Bonnaroo looking at it on paper. Being able to just go into the photo pit on that one, and that was, I don't know, that was what, 2013, 14? That was a few years in after shooting. So yeah, it was unreal.
We were good friends at this time. This was in 2012 or 13. I can't remember the exact. I'm sure we have photo evidence of this, but you had a contributor or a photographer at that time not show up or cancel last minute or get sick or something. And we were there to see Umphrey's McGee. And I came up to you just to say hello, what's up? And you had a camera in your hand. And you basically said, I don't want to fucking run up and down these stairs all day. I will give you a photo pass to go down into the pit if you go down and take photos. And I was like, I've never taken photos before. And you're like, I don't care. I just don't want to run up and down the stairs. And that was the first time that I really played with an SLR camera. And that was one of the first times I really got to meet Nick Stock. He was down in the pit. So that was fun. And Larry Holtz was down there. Legends were down there. It was incredible. I want to say Mimna was possibly down there as well. Brad Yeakel. It was kind of like the early days of MusicMarauders contributors, and it blew my mind. And then I realized, I can get free tickets and photo passes through this guy. So yeah.
The way you explain it makes me sound so mean. Like, here, take this and get your ass down there. But I think one of two things happened. Either I was on LSD and I really couldn't make it back down, or I was positioning you to have that opportunity because I thought you might be well positioned for it.
Yeah, there was absolutely no hey, get down there, Wook, and do my job. It was, hey, here's an opportunity. I also don't want to run up and down the stairs because it is a workout. Let's be honest. It's brutal. And I don't miss those days of running up and down the Red Rock stairs. But yeah, it was a complete, I don't want to say a passing of the torch, but at that time you were kind of fading out of direct coverage of live shows, and you were more transitioning into the event producer side of things and obviously management of the Music Marauder family, let's call it.
I'm Brad Yeakel, and I have been contributing to Music Marauders since 2012.
If I really think back on this, there's a series of stupid little coincidences that led me down this path. So if I'm being completely honest, in 7th grade, I had a Spanish class, and one of my buddies wore a Grateful Dead shirt to class that day. And I was just immediately taken back by the color. I was just like, this is vibrant, it's bright, it's so cool. And so I had previously assumed that the Grateful Dead was like metal or something like that, because the name. And then I had this weird juxtaposition of ideas because I had this metal band in my brain, and then I'm seeing all this colorful, lovey, fun, bubbly stuff. And I thought, this is wild. Maybe I should look into this. So very slowly, I went from like the skeletons in the closet, Grateful Dead, to, I guess, expanding to the point of like, probably not Working Man's Dead yet, but actually one of the early ones was probably Europe 72. And then my freshman year of high school, I was walking through the halls wearing a Grateful Dead shirt. And this upperclassman was walking through the hall, and he just stopped me and he said, hold on a sec. You like the Dead? And I said, yeah. And he said, have you ever heard Fish? And I said, no. And he said, you've gotta. And this was 94. So I was like, okay, I'll check into it, whatever. Listened to a few things, was like, I don't know if this is for me. But for some reason, I just continued to listen to it, even though I wasn't quite sold. And then all of a sudden it was part of my fabric. And I just was like, I know every song they've ever done. I have no idea what happened, but now I can't stop.
What was your first experience like going to like, say, a live concert or like, say, a music festival? What were those first few experiences like for you?
Well, again, this is kind of hilarious because one of my friends when I was like 9 or something like that won tickets to the local fair, and New Kids on the Block and Tiffany were performing.
How exciting.
So those were my very first concert experiences. And then probably didn't see anything for like 7 years. And then I saw Pearl Jam at Merriweather Post Pavilion when I was 16. And that was the beginning. That was really when it was like, oh, I love this. Yeah, and then 98, I saw Fish for the first time. And after that, it was just constant. String Cheese and Mo and Umphrey's.
How did you first hear about Music Marauders?
Well, as you know, Denver's most famous Grateful Dead bar owner.
No names. I'm going to bleep that out when you say that.
Okay, understood. No, that's, I mean,
I actually
considering,
might, though. That'd be pretty funny.
Considering everything, it's understandable if you do. But anyway, so he was just on the verge of closing the Quixotes that he had that was downtown on Larimer or something like that.
21st and Lawrence.
Yeah, that's it.
I love that. Was like my favorite of all of his bars, and they had the like, stripper stage in the back room and the courtyard. I mean,
incredible.
What a cool spot at a cool moment in time for this city.
Absolutely. And so I think what happened was they announced they were closing that location and moving. And I just randomly wrote a little article about it because I was fairly new to Denver at the time, and I had really, really loved that particular version of Quixotes. And so basically I wrote an article about that, and then a mutual friend of ours basically sent my article to you and came to me and said, I have a friend who's doing something cool that you might be able to work with. And they made the intro, and you and I became fast friends, and things have been good since. So that's how I found out about it. And of all of my photography and writing outlets that I've ever worked with, I've worked with you far and away more than anybody else. So I appreciate the opportunity. I've gotten to do so many cool things because of Music Marauders.
Dude, I mean, we were meeting like the Henhouse Prowlers in the park and producing like 20-minute like music jams and, and like just with like whatever we had. And like, I think of like Railroad Earth and the fucking, at Pearl Street Mall and things like that. They became sort of mildly iconic moments in our music scene up here, like fairly. I mean, anybody that was at that run remembers when Railroad Earth went and played on the Pearl Street Mall as a full with the full Andy Gosling, the whole crew. I wish my mics were a little bit better. It's still out there.
Without further ado, Railroad Earth.
I have a funny story about that I've never told, that I feel like this is the opportune moment for that. When I initially put together that session, it was just supposed to be an interview with myself and Railroad Earth backstage at Boulder Theater. And I pushed and said, hey, we should do more. We should go out in the mall and do this session. And the band was just kind of like, oh, yeah, maybe. And that's basically a no from our standpoint. That's a no. So when I showed up, I met with their manager backstage pre what was supposed to be an interview. And I remember saying to their manager was Brian Ross at the time. And I remember saying to Brian, what if to start the interview, we get the whole band in the dumpster out back of Boulder Theater? And what if they pop out of the dumpster? And he's just immediately, no, we're not doing that. And so then I felt like, okay, all right, then what if they come out in the Pearl Street Mall and play a session? So that was a much easier sell. And so that's how that session came about.
That's some pre-interview brilliance, really, because, you're asking them to do something they're definitely going to say no to. And then you're like, well, what about something like this, And there was a little crowd there, and I think, it's one of those moments,
You introduced me to Red Rocks. That was a hell of a time. Was actually traveling through what we did 2 nights. Medeski, Wolfpack, and Motet. Was that? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, so you were at the Motet. Did you do Green Sky too? Why did I think Green Sky?
And you got me a photo pass for Green Sky and Leftover. And that was another, like, how the hell did I get here? Like, what?
I'll say outright that the reason you were there is you deserved it. You put yourself in a position where your work speaks for itself, your reliability and your output, man. You are and have been for a long time producing top-notch work, and that's what put you there. That's why you were there.
Appreciate that. Within that week, I got to go to the Gorge and go to Red Rocks, and that was a pretty wild week.
Through a decade and a half of articles, touring, booking, and management, no one have I grown closer to than Roosevelt Collier. Our shared passion for slide music, our love of breakfast, and the laughs we've shared have resulted in a brotherhood of nonsense. He's one of my favorite dudes, and I'm endlessly grateful to have him in my life. How are you doing, bud?
This is crazy, man. This is crazy. It's been a long time, man. I'm happy to see my boy Jay West.
What's happening, dude? I love that you had to have a passcode to get into this meeting. That's super sketchy. No one else has had to do that.
Dude, I was like, yo, this is, I need a passcode. I think I'm finna go meet with the Godfather, which I am.
Get out of here.
Dude, what's happening, bro? First of all, man, I miss y'all. I miss you, dude. It's been a long time, and I'm happy to see you, dude. For sure.
Yeah, man.
It's been super, super long time, dude. Things just been going and going, but whenever you call, dude, don't you ever ask me, if it's okay. How dare you, man? I felt disrespected, brother. Like,
I know you're
like
busy.
That. You be like Rosie, so yo, this that time, like, yo, let's make it happen.
Dude, I appreciate you. You're the best. I know you're busy though too, man. You've got a lot going on, which we'll get into actually. I first saw you with the Lee Boys. Can you talk about what that time in your life was like?
Wow. Taking me way back. I forget that you've been around since kind of day one. Yeah, that's the family band. That's the family. That's my upbringing. That's everything that I have been made of right now stems from them. That's the family band. So those are the guys that raised me as a little baby. That's like blood. That's my uncles, the guys that used to teach me everything that I've known as far as music and, just being a man. So deeply rooted. We come from a rooted family, grandfather and so forth and so on. So playing with them outside of church was just phenomenal. We had some of the best times and we made like a lot of noise, positive noise. And it was literally like church every show, and the folks came waiting on it, It was a place to come and, like you could let go of all of your worries just for that hour or two. And we rocking your socks off straightforward, everything was powerful. That was a good upbringing from me, 2001 to like 2011-ish, 10. And then made a change, with myself as far as just doing Roosevelt. But the boys, man, we were something sharp, we were, I believe that you saw us once or twice.
I saw you guys actually a handful of times at different festivals across the country. For me, growing up as somebody who wasn't religious, it was my only exposure to church was guys like the Lee Boys and for a while, Robert Randolph and the family band, Calvin Cook.
Yeah, that's right.
I used to see a lot of slide, the Campbell Brothers. And as somebody who followed the Allman Brothers here and there when I could, with Warren Haynes and Derek Trucks on the front of that, I really had a propensity for and a love for slide music, and then finding what was coming out of the churches and stuff was just life-changing for me, for sure.
Oh, bro, listen, like all of those names are deeply rooted with that sound, going like, I've been outside of the church and into the Southern rock era, like you have like all the Almonds and the Derricks and the Warrens and the Blackberries and just a slew of people. But it's that sound, like of the slide. It's a voice that's been played, and if it's been played right, like you really can't tell the difference. Like if it's someone singing or like a guy or ladies playing, So it is for sure it hits the soul,
Yeah. Around that time that you mentioned, I think 2010, 2011, in that realm, maybe 2012, 13, somewhere around there. I'm not sure exactly when the first time I reached out to you was, but I remember seeing you and thinking that, and I don't know if I had seen you surrounded by like all-star players and doing like a super jam format, or if I just thought you would be a good fit for that. I can't really remember the specifics of it, but I reached out to you and we put together what was eventually called the Colorado Get Down.
Wow.
I remember you were like, I don't, who are the good guys to play with? Who should do this? And immediately I thought Joey Porter on keys, and then the rhythm section would be Dave Watts and Garrett Sayers from the Motet. And then just as kind of like a wild card, I thought it would be interesting to have Andy Thorne on banjo.
Let me tell you about that first. That conversation went just like that. Of course, that's been a minute ago. But prior to I had been doing like a lot of like sit-ins and guests, and just doing like a few like all-star jams like around, like in the South, and just like working in, but I was sitting in with like a lot of big name people. But I believe that the first like heavy hitter all-star jam was with Justin, Colorado Get Down. We talked about the name. We talked about everything. I was like, look, I'm really simple to play with. Get me some heavyweight. And Justin was like, yo, we're going to get this person. I was like, I make it happen, Cap. And so when it all came about, the lineup was like, it was bigger than what we may have thought, like it was about to be, because the lineup with just the Motet guys and just that alone was insane. Just the backing band was insane. But then like you add Andy Thorne and it's like, what's happening right now. It's actually real. So that's the core. But then when everybody else gets wind of that, it's like a wrecking ball that just hit the city, that is coming. And everybody was ready for it, Dude, I can remember the first, oh my God, at sound check was just insane, because everybody was hyped. Everybody was like, yo, this is happening. This is happening. Well, once we got there, everybody was hyped. About showtime started, oh, you can forget it, brother. That roof went off.
That place was it was Cervantes' other side, and it was absolutely packed. I remember leading up to the shows, Joey Porter kept hitting me up, and he's like, you got like charts or like songs? And I was like, Roosevelt, and I've never worked with Roosevelt before, but he's telling me don't worry about it, it'll be all good. And Joey, I don't think works that way. He ended up working that way. But
No, you did. You're absolutely right. So thank you. That was a big thing of mine. I was like, listen, we don't have a set list, we don't have charts. I was like, the whole thing of a get down is to get people back to their roots of playing, which is when, if they were kids, they would just go rock out like in a basement or like in their house, and they didn't have charts and stuff like that. They were playing for fun. I was like, if I can get everybody back to that level, like of their brain, everybody would be comfortable instantly, and then magic happened. And that's exactly what happened. Everybody understood what was about to happen. They understood, hey, yo, this is like essentially just like a big jam session.
It was a great format, and those guys fit it well. But then also,
yeah,
I don't know if it was, I think there was a show at Red Rocks, and I don't know if it was Lettuce or Big Gigantic or both, but it ended up that Big Gigantic, Dom and Jeremy showed up, and then the Lettuce guys came over, and it felt like we were in a room that probably had, I want to say like maybe a 500 person capacity, maybe less, but it felt like we were on Jam Cruise, and that place was nuts.
Dude, you're absolutely right. So first of all, man, the place was already nuts, going crazy, and then end up like happening. You're right. Freaking Lettuce was up the road. They got wind of it, and they sent word, yo, we are like on the way. And Big Gigantic was up the road. They got wind of it. They just popped out. They was like, yo, we coming through. And look, this is my first show in Denver. This is our first show together. You had already knew what was about to happen. He was like, listen, Denver is the city, it's just a mecca. Of course, I had no idea, but I knew these players, and I knew what can happen. Man, I wasn't even ready for all of that, because we ended up playing like another hour. Once like everybody, all of the guests got there, it was just, it's hang time now,
Yeah, that was crazy. I just remember the green room being packed and just filled with smoke. And then even after, I remember coming down with like extra oversized, extra large pizzas and just handing them out. And it was just this scene that was just, and it was happening. I got to tell you about it. It was happening at a really crucial time for the city of Denver and for Colorado, when independent music was at a pinnacle moment. That night changed my life. I was down there working with some people who I had idolized musically. You got guys like Eric Krasno, I'm just like, and I'm sending them up on stage and saying, hey, Roosevelt's calling for you. And, it's the first time I really felt the full potential of what a super jam could look like. And it changed the course of my life.
Man, but, I think that night really sparked what would become like a wave of like all of these other super jams that we see, because prior to it, I didn't see anyone doing it like on that level.
There was stuff going on in like New Orleans and stuff for, the late nights for Jazz Fest. There was a lot of that stuff going on, but I really do feel like we kind of made it a regular thing, especially when I was doing stuff over at the One Up, it was just felt like a regular thing that was happening in town.
Yeah, no, dude, that's what I'm saying. That time frame, bro, was like a key point with like a lot of bands, because they got wind of what was happening. They got wind of, one, you booking this spot that's very cool, that's at this game room. Everybody like games. But then there's this venue. That's this venue that got the perfect sound. And they are selling out these shows, and people are packing them out, and the bands are killing. And it was just like, that sparked a whole another like wave of like super jams, or like, just like mashups that was happening. And they were burning, going back to back to back. And which was a big point of life right there, for that next 5 year span, things grew. And I think that, and a lot of that stuff spent off too, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a really exciting time.
Definitely want to thank you guys. We did some cool stuff with Music Marauders over the years. When you were booking at the One Up, you know, God, we had the Yarmony All-Stars that one time. I think it was on my birthday. And it was July 31st. My birthday was at midnight, and we had members of the infamous String Dusters, members of Green Sky, members of Railroad as the core band, which we all knew was going to happen. But then Tim was eating down the street, Carbone was eating down the street, and ran into Amos Lee's band. And they were there because they were playing Red Rocks the next night. And Tim's like, "Oh, come on down. We're having this big party." And all of a sudden we've got all the people I just mentioned, Chris Pandolfi, Andy Hall, Dave Bruza, the Drunken Hearts as kind of the core band, Tim Carbone, Andy Gessling, rest in peace, and maybe members of Elephant Revival too. I'm not sure. That might have been a different one. But
was Allie Crawl on that one?
Allie Crawl was on that. Yeah, Allie and Tim. And all of a sudden, Amos Lee's band shows up, and we've got Amos Lee's pedal steel player playing Cody's pedal steel. Amos Lee is playing my guitar. And they did Fat Bottom Girls by Queen. And it was just this crazy. And I feel like every time we did something at the One Up down there, it kind of turned into that.
It was a magical place and time.
Yeah, just special guests would just kind of pour out of the walls. But yeah, anyway, so I went down memory lane the other day, and I was listening to some recordings of those nights. I think it was probably better in person than it sounds. But yeah, so appreciate you and all the support that you've given, not only me and the band, but obviously the festival too.
Blazing down the road, about 85. Oh Lord, feeling lucky to be alive. The clouds in the distance, they call out my name. Fires will burn everywhere the same. I should have known better when I set my course. A leaf in the wind, the universal force. And looking back now, it just goes to show. Now I know you better fly low. This road I've been on for a long, long time. Blue skies and asphalt, riding the line. Life's rough and tough, I got lost in the dream. Mind lit and daring, pressed against the sea. Pressed against the sea. Looking back now, it just goes to show. Now I know you gotta fly low. See through the glass, shattered and stained. Takes one to know the heat behind the flame.
Hi, my name is Nancy Isaac, and I am a photographer for Music Marauders. Well, I've always loved live music, forever, since like high school. I also went to college in New Orleans, where, of course, there's the Jazz Fest and all the great gospel and all the great musicians. And I used to see, a lot of legends like Fats Domino and Alan Toussaint. So I've always had this music thing, and I was in art school at Tulane as well. And I can't believe that I didn't marry the two together with the live music and the photography at that time. If I could have had my camera back then, I can't believe the stuff I could have had photos of. At any rate, fast forward to me living in Denver and going out to see all the cool live musical events that you were putting on, although I didn't even know you at the time, at like the One Up Colfax and the Gothic. And I started bringing in my point and shoot because, I'd see somebody I loved, like Michael Kang from String Cheese would be there playing on this little tiny stage, and it was so cool. So, I was doing that. I was just doing it for myself. And then I just kind of met Jim Mimna and saw how he was doing it and taking it to a totally new level. And unfortunately, because of the venues having their crackdowns on, cameras with detachable lenses, it started to become a problem. And then I lucked out one day. We were talking to the sadly late Corey Sandoval at the Gothic, I think. And I was introduced to you, and I started telling you all my woes about not being able to bring in my cameras, because point and shoots take horrible photos. And you're like, well, I'm promoting this. Do you want a photo pass tonight? And I was like, hell yes. And I had my camera locked up in the office because the manager of the Gothic took it away from me. Anyway, thanks to you, I got to shoot my first live music event officially. And it was the Picking on Cancer with Billy Strings, Allie Crowell, Andy Hall. Oh my God, I can't even remember, but it was probably some of the Drunken Hearts too. But it was like the most amazing event to raise money for cancer. And that was when I got to join Music Marauders officially. And that was like, 2012, 2013, I think?
I feel like it was later than that. If it were the Picking on Cancer, we did the first one, I think, either in 2014 or 15. So somewhere around that time, maybe for the second one. But I remember specifically having an embarrassing moment that night. Well, not embarrassing in the moment, but embarrassing in hindsight. I was backstage alone with Billy Strings, and the band was already on stage, and he was just picking on his guitar and warming up and ripping through some licks. And, I knew that he was this young kid, newer on the scene, and I knew he was from Michigan, so I just felt this inclination to like provide an encouraging word. And I remember roaming over to him and saying like, hey, like something along the lines of keep at it, kid, or, something stupid, which in the moment, maybe that was a nice thing to say. But in hindsight, it's so cringe for me. When I look back, I'm like, oh my gosh. Because, you look at how big he is now. You said he sent you a message about your work at one point.
He did. It was right after that show because I posted photos from that show. And somehow I didn't do it. Somehow he got tagged. And the next thing I know, I got a friend request from him from his William Apostle page. And then he sent me a message saying, thanks for the photos. You're a rock star. And of course I've screenshot that since because, now he's like selling out and winning Grammys. And, it's just amazing. Like we would see him at the Larimer Lounge or Cervantes' Other Side or he photobombed a photo I was taking of some friends at Cervantes, and he was just, 22 or whatever he was, 23.
Yeah, at one point he climbed onto the stage at the One Up. He didn't come through the backstage door. I think they saw him like in the front row or something, and they motioned for him to come back. And I just so happened to be at the backstage door looking out and just taking in the scene. And I see this kid climbing over the rail. So, of course, I go flying out. And there I am gripping up Billy Strings and like thinking holding back a fan that's going to jump up on stage. And then,
oh my God.
Yeah, then the realization came to me. Another embarrassing moment with me and Billy Strings. With you, there's this twist to it that's humorous and there's a depth to it that I just value and I can't stop reading.
Oh, I appreciate that a lot. I'm glad you touched on the humor because one of the things that I've always tried to do with that is at least put in one line that makes me laugh. If I can do that and make me laugh, I hope it makes you laugh and makes everybody else laugh. And that's been a real signature part of my writing style is trying to slip in something.
Success achieved.
Oh, good. Okay, I'm glad to hear that.
Is there any show that you're like, fuck, that was epic?
My wedding.
Yeah, that was a good one. That was a good one.
That one was for me.
Yeah,
for people who weren't able to attend, Kevin, you were there. So, I mean, and I consider you family, man. And you're one of my best friends. I consider you a brother. And it was a cool night, though. It was Narayan Padmanabha played sitar as Carly and I in our party came down the aisle. He played during cocktail hour. And then like a week or two before, when our budget was already maxed, I noticed that Iron Horse Bluegrass was going to be in town for like one night only or something. And it just happened to be on my wedding night. So we worked it out with them to bring him up and have him play during dinner.
Yeah, that was a surprise. I mean, I knew you had told me about the band because, I was one of the few who knew who was in the band, and I was able to watch some of their sound check and everything. But when Iron Horse showed up, I was like, oh, damn.
It was really exciting for me. That's one of my favorite bands of all time. You talk about underrated. I mean, those guys, they're picking on series that they do with all the different bands. It's legendary for me. So that was a huge honor to have them at my wedding. But then the wedding band itself was fronted by Jen Hartswick of... Trey Band. Bernie Worrell was on keys of Parliament Funkadelic and Talking Heads. Roosevelt Collier. O'Teal was supposed to be on bass, but he had Dead and Company rehearsals. And I told him, he was so apologetic. And I said, listen, man, that's like, for a guy like me, that's like the best excuse you could have.
Yeah.
And then Russ Lawton was on drums. And man, it was just a fun night with all of my friends and family, and one of the happiest nights of my life. And being able to have those musicians in house, that was just something I'll never forget.
I'll never forget Jen singing Kiss by Prince and you and Carly dancing. And it was so cool to watch her sing that. And Bernie Worrell, another hero, getting to meet him was, that was legendary. I'll never forget how, at that time he was, I don't want to say on his decline, but he was getting older, and how skinny, and his hands, he had those, what do you call it? The fingerless gloves. I'll never forget that, and that's, it was incredible. Incredible night, man.
What are some of your favorite Music Marauders experiences?
I mean, I don't know that I can technically consider it a Music Marauders experience, but your and Carly's wedding is one of the most amazing things that I've ever been a part of. I was literally 2 days ago talking about it, and it was kind of in a conversation with one of my coworkers, and we were talking about Bernie Worrell and just how much we both love him. And I was like, I've been very fortunate because I grew up in an area of Pennsylvania that was not far from where he was in New Jersey. And so I've been seeing that guy when I say small rooms, I mean like the Doylestown, Pennsylvania BPOE Elks Lodge, like tiny little rooms with like 30 people. And he would just be so nice and so friendly and so considerate and kind and caring. So I just would go to see him all the time on the East Coast. And then when I moved here and we started linking up and I realized how close you were with Bernie too, I was just like, this feels good. This feels like a community that I'm already sort of part of. So that was wonderful. And then seeing him at your wedding along with that all-star band that you put together was one of the highlights of my life, man. Really, it was truly fantastic. And I'm so grateful that I was there, and so grateful I got to talk to Jen Hartswick that night. I got to hang out with all these people that I've just loved their work for so long. So that is by far and away my favorite Music Marauders memory, for sure. And there's been other great ones. Yeah. There have been other fantastic ones, dude. Everything at the One-Up, just all of that was fantastic. And you've done so much stuff that I can't even really sort through it all in my brain in a hurry. Just all the all-star bands that you've put together. I saw Rob Compa first at a Super Jam that you put together. I saw Stoops at a Super Jam. There's all these musicians that I was familiar with their main project, but then I got to see them do something totally new and totally unique and different and wonderful. The Jason Hand Rhythmatronics stuff was... Dude, the one with manga, unbelievable. So,
he's something, isn't he?
Oh,
and we had Raul Pineda on drums for that. And it's just, those guys were just locked.
Monsters, dude. It was so cool. So cool.
I think about standing at the top of Red Rocks with you and just saying, I want to show you something. And I took you to Red Rocks, and we stood at the very top on the plaza.
We had a picture.
We do. We have a picture, absolutely. But we're looking down, and I wanted to communicate to you how much that place meant to me and how you were for sure destined to play that stage, and it was coming down the line. And that was, I mean, I don't even know if we had a show under our belt at that point yet or not.
Bro, man, I have never been to Red Rocks like you've been. And like you walked my ass up all them steps. And I'm like, Justin, there's a lot of steps, brother. But it was a beautiful sight. And then once we hit the top, like you gave me that speech, I was like, yo, this means a lot. And I could feel it too, you know. It was at that point where like I knew that we had something good going.
Yeah, it was absolutely a turning point. And then years later, you played that stage, and it was awesome to see. You know, special moment. I remember watching you play with Umphrey's McGee and Bocante and
Umphrey's McGee, right.
That was really, really special.
Absolutely, dude.
Yeah. I remember a bunch of other cool moments. I remember you playing at Coors Field pregame before the Colorado Rockies, and that was after Yarmony Grass when our whole band was basically pretty hungover.
Yeah,
I remember. Yeah, it was pretty early at the pregame. Yeah, bummer. And then I have memories of like touring them through the mountains with guys like Bill Nershi and O'Teal.
Oh, dude, let's talk about that right quick, dude. Let's talk about Bill Nershi real quick. Just touring in the mountains with Bill. Well, first of all, no, I'm sorry. Let's back up, because before that happened, we had played the first show with Bill Nershi was, I believe, not at the One-Up, but in Boulder.
Right. So that would have been maybe 2015, probably, when we were working with him.
Yeah, because that was the whole Bill era, which we did that. And we did like a Ned Fest shortly after. But working with Bill was probably all of it was fun. But working with Bill was like a dream. To have him, first of all, he's a shredder. You know, Bill was ready to let loose and get down. Every show, he was like, Rosie, whatever you need, you know. But Bill is a hang. Bill is a real hang. Listen, I'm just going to say this, you know, out of respectfulness, and I love this guy, you know. And we're some one night, and listen, I'm not a drinker, okay? All right? I'm not a drinker, but there's this guy named Bill Nershi that if he tell you to drink some tequila, if you say no, it's going to happen eventually. So, it was one night, you know, it was a good show, and I was saying no, but then it's like telling like your pops no, you know.
I think that was also Murray's birthday.
I think it was Murray's birthday, so I gave in and I had a shot of tequila with Bill Nershi, you know. Yeah, and it bro, some of the best time, and yes, that was Murray's birthday, but dude, man, playing with Bill was one of the best times, bro, for sure. And then we toured like in the mountains with it, you know.
We
like
did. We went up in the mountains with him. I know I told this story before, but I pulled into a Starbucks that was next to our hotel we were staying at, and I was in the drive-thru and I ordered my drinks. And at the window, they hand me 2 empty cups and they say, "Have a good day." And I was like, "What?" And I was so confused as to why the cups were empty. And I still hadn't had coffee yet that morning, so I needed some caffeine. And I looked in the window and I see you and Bill at the front counter, and Nershi is just cracking up. He had told the barista to give me 2 empty cups.
He's cracking up. He's
so funny.
And listen, this is first thing in the morning, everybody. This is like 8 o'clock or something like that. 8 or 9. Like we just woke up. It was a long night prior. Bill is already on one. Like
he's already on it.
He's already, like, you're not even playing. He's already on it. Jesus Christ, some good times, man.
Yeah, and I think of also like when we toured through New Mexico and playing at Taos Mesa Brewing, and one time it dumped snow down there, and we were with, I think, the Genetics guys, and we were throwing snowballs at you. And the Genetics guys played with you for a while. That was so fun with Joel and Jeff. And
dude, those guys, listen, dude, that band there was like one of my favorite, like, Denver jam bands, bro, for sure, dude. Them boys was rocking. Like, all of them were like beast mode. And I remember that I had never been in snow like that, number one. And then
it was like a foot of snow, I think, right?
Dude, it was a foot of snow. Listen, I'm a black guy from Florida, right? Now I'm in snow. Then I'm getting hit with snowball. Listen, I was like, yo, hey, take it easy, take it easy.
So fun. I remember that. And I remember also going up to Matt and Terry's house once, and there was like maybe 2 or 3 feet of snow on the ground.
Matt and Terry's house.
We were with the Genetics guys.
Yeah. Now that I believe that was way more snow.
That was way more snow.
I remember us when we stepped in the snow was up to like our knees or something like that.
It might have even been a little bit higher, but yeah, it was absolutely crazy. But going back to New Mexico, I remember one of the shows when Luis Guzman walked into the dressing room at set break and blew our minds. And then the next morning we're having breakfast with him.
Dude,
and he's telling stories. And
first of all, like how surreal was that?
So I remember, the guy that we were working with at the time, his name was John, and he was the promoter down there. And he knocked on the door and was like, "Hey, we have somebody that wants to meet you." And then we were talking through set list and like we were working on things. And I remember just being like, "Hey, now might not be a good time just because we're trying to work through these things and we're gonna, can right after the show, no problem, whatever." And then he pushed the door a little wider open, and behind him was Luis Guzman. And I was like, "Oh, yeah. Come on."
Yeah, dude, I was like, "Wait, everybody stop. Seriously, don't just say somebody wants to see you. Listen, dude, that was epic." And look, he stayed the whole show. And then we shut down the club and it was just us there, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was us and him there. And it was like very chill. And he was like, "Let me get your number. I'll call you in the morning and we'll do breakfast." And we're like, well, I remember him walking out and us just being, "Oh, well, that was awesome. And that was the last time we'll see that guy." But that was super cool,
Sure enough, that next day, we had breakfast with him. And we was like, "Yo, this is happening." And he beat us there.
Oh, yeah. He saved a table for us. And there's like people in the restaurant looking at him and like we're showing up. And he's like, I remember he stood up and he waved his hand so that we knew where our table was, as if we didn't see Luis Guzman just like sitting there waiting for us.
Waiting. Bro, look, that was epic. And then we will go head on and do some actual shows with him too. Man, that was a good time too, man. Man, we've had a lot of good runs, brother. Crazy, man. I'm just thinking about, there's so much more. Like even doing this stuff with O'Teal, that's a whole nother jam thing, which was epic as well, because that brought out a whole nother crowd too. Yeah.
That was life-changing stuff for me, man. When I think about all of the musicians I've worked with, for me, everything opened up when I started working with you, and then I just met all of these other people, and it was really special. And I met O'Teal through you, and it changed the course of my life. And through that friendship, you were at my wedding. And,
No. I wasn't at your wedding. I played your wedding. Let's get it right.
You first attended it,
like your band,
and then you played it.
Was the best band that you, bro? Let's talk about your band. All right, dude. Like you go, you know what? Like you can name drop if you want.
So yeah, Jen Hartswick up front, Bernie Worrell on keys, which for me, that's the biggest honor of my life when I think about everything I've done and everything I've been through. He's my favorite musician of all time, and meeting Bernie Worrell was just the biggest honor in the world. And then to have him at my wedding and hanging out with my family and my dad and my brother and my mom and watching my bride hug him on my wedding day, just my head exploded. But then it was you on pedal steel, and then we were supposed to have O'Teal, but he had rehearsals. Bob Weir, I have a funny story about when Bob Weir called him when we were in the car together one time. But anyways, but then Reed Mathis subbed in.
Reed Mathis.
And then Russ Lawton from Trey Band on drums.
Russ. You can say epic house band? Yeah.
And then you guys played the One Up the next night, and we had a bunch of guests. And it's funny, I don't know if I've ever told you this, but that night at my wedding, the Motet guys had called me a bunch, and I missed the calls. And after their Red Rocks show, they wanted to come up and crash the wedding. And they put in the name, so the place was called Betcher Mansion, but there's a place in Denver called Betcher Concert Hall, and they accidentally put the wrong place in. And they went down to Denver, and they're like knocking on the door of this building, thinking that there's a wedding going on there, and they were in the wrong place. But they almost crashed the wedding. That would have been fun.
I did not know that, bro. Yeah. I had no idea. That's funny.
Specific shows that you produced and that we got to go to in photo. I mean, the One Up has a really special place in my heart, just venue wise. I mean, you threw the Rhythmatronic shows with all of the Caribbean and Latin amazingness and Michael Kang and Jason Hahn, and then the Worship My Organ shows. And the first time I got to see Skerrick, who's still one of my favorite musicians on the face of the earth. I mean, I hold a huge, place in my heart for the Garrett Sayers trio. I think Garrett is one of the most incredible and underappreciated musicians we have in the scene. And, just watching him blossom through his shows at Highland Tap, and then we had some at the Armory. and then God, with the Umphrey shows and the cheese shows you've had me cover. But the one that really I always think about is you and I went to DU. I think it's called the Newman Center. And we got to see Bela Fleck play with Chick Corea. And I got to photo it, not on a direct, like right next to the stage, because they didn't allow anyone to do that. But I got to photo it from a long distance. And then you took me backstage and we got to meet Bela and Chick. And Chick Corea is my hero. There's no one in my mind who has done more for jazz piano and jazz fusion and just the groups he put together. And then his friendship with Bela. I mean, so that one really sticks out to me. Getting to photo you with Bela backstage. Yeah, I would say that was definitely up there. I mean, we didn't per se go to this for work with MusicMarauders, but our trip on Jam Cruise was pretty amazing too. So that was just as a friend to friend and debauchery.
Some coverage of some form did come out of that.
Yeah, I think we wrote some words. I will say one show that I also highly remember was you sent me, or I requested Summer Camp 2013, and I got to go with Nick Stock, and it was Umphrey's and Mo and the whole thing, but Medeski, Martin, and Wood was one of the headliners, and I got to watch in the pit, and I basically photoed the entire thing. I got to watch John Medeski take apart his organ because it was not working while he was fixing it in the back, and he was still playing shit on the front. It was mind-blowing. So
I've seen Medeski, Martin, and Wood for multiple decades, and he does that frequently. I don't know if he's personally just deciding to take it apart or making it work differently, but I am not on that plane. I do not understand it, but it's amazing to see.
Totally. I would love to ask you, because you and I have kind of, we've been through the ringer over the last, 20, let's call it 15 years almost. You have presented shows all over the United States. You've held music festivals. You have truly changed the dynamic of the music scene in certain areas. And I don't want to give you that much credit, but you really have done an amazing job. You have. If you could go back and really just focus in on one venue or one festival or one opportunity. And I don't want to say, do you regret anything? That's not my question, but is there something that you were like, damn, this could have been it, and it just didn't turn into it?
First off, I think you're overstating my influence. But thank you. Second, there's a specific scenario that comes to mind immediately when you frame it that way. I think it would be easy for me to say the one up because of how it turned out so abruptly. But for me, it's Snug Lake Amphitheater in British Columbia, Canada, in the interior of British Columbia. And it was a 165-acre off-grid property that had a lodge and then a huge house on it. And they produced a festival without me that was a little bit smaller. And then I came in with the Genetics Boys on their second year playing the festival. They brought me in, and I was brought in to produce the festival, I guess is what it turned into. And we had 3 nights of String Cheese Incident. We had Garage Mahal reunion up there. Not the full reunion, which we ended up doing later, but this was 3/4 reunion. Kimmock was there. Oh, man. I mean, there were so many. Yeah. And we had some artists at large. Roosevelt was up there. O'Teal was up there. In the second year, we had 3 nights of Lotus, and Hartswick was up there, Jen Hartswick. It was, for me, the most community-based, organic project that I've ever been a part of that had the most potential. Mm-hmm. Just the level of production, the size of the stages, all of the activities that were going on, the horses roaming the property in this pine forest with these beautiful rolling hills overlooking a lake on site where people were swimming. And it was so magical. And the way it was run by these jam fans, it was myself and a gentleman by the name of Keither and a guy who owned the property. His name was Rob. But it was just this magical moment in time where the jam festival revival felt like it could happen again. We were wrong. And even if we weren't wrong, COVID would have had its way with that. But for me, that's it could have been such this incredible, amazing long-term community that was based there, but it did not go that way. So that was the scenario I would think of.
Okay. And I love that. I had a feeling you were going to say Snug Lake. A quick follow-up. Do you think anything like that could exist today in the United States, not just as a true jam vehicle or jam site, but do you think there's room for that type of festival anymore? Because as we see, it's like death row for festivals these days. I mean, it's one after another. It's just getting it. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's possible. It just takes a ton of money, and you got to be ready to light it on fire every year, year after year. I'm dead serious, though.
Yeah.
If somebody comes along with enough money, someone wins the lotto or has inheritance or whatever that looks like, these events can keep going in that kind of true capacity where you're not booking certain acts to appeal to certain people or feeling like you have to recoup this cash. In this moment, like at Snug Lake, we did the best we could and tried to, draw people out and to make this really incredible thing happen. And we really did some awesome work on the ground. But in current day where we're at, it would take a lot of money and the willingness to know that that money may not come back, and a place like that could sustain. In fact, on some small level, it's still my dream to have some kind of a piece of property or someplace, some little corner of the universe where we can do stuff like that. Maybe not on a large scale, but where we can burn a little cash. We produced Music Marauders Live, which was a podcast almost before podcasts were podcasts. I mean, podcasts weren't popular when we were doing Music Marauders Live initially, and we kind of treated it like a show. Almost like a news show or something. We would run through some stories, we would banter a bit, we would include interviews from artists at different shows. And then we took quite a while off, and then we relaunched it in 2019 with a whole team and produced live sessions in my living room with bands like Fruition, the Drunken Hearts. Vince Herman actually debuted a Leftover Salmon song for us. And for me, those were really special, though exhausting moments in producing that. But I wonder what your takeaway is from producing Music Marauders Live in both formats.
Well, the first one, man, again, it was a bootstrap type situation. I think we were doing that at like Pete Wall's basement, and then like Pete Wall would sometimes sit in and kind of he's on the keyboards and maybe like give us a little bit of a back and forth or a little bit more perspective, which I loved. God bless Pete Wall. But yeah, that was just like long edits. The tools weren't great then as far as editing sound. So, I'm a video editor by trade, and that's what I do. So I would take to editing sound from a video perspective using the tools that I have. And they were adequate, for splicing together sound. I think the interesting part that we did then that we didn't do as much later was just going out and getting interviews from people and like grabbing them and like getting them to talk in our phones, and sometimes not getting the best audio, but always getting like really interesting perspectives. And, and as the tools evolved, again, we were trying to do some of this stuff when it really wasn't, you couldn't just have a Zoom, walking around with a microphone. Those tools weren't available, and so as that art form has developed, I think we really pushed the limit as to what we were capable of. And I really enjoyed in retrospect, the team that we built around the Music Marauders Live 2.0. That was always fun. It always had a very festive atmosphere, but I know it was a heavy lift. It was a heavy lift to having, those people in your house. It was a heavy lift to divvy up the work. I think we had the different members of the team. Ryan was doing some of the editing. Kevin was doing some of the logistical stuff. We're all trying to contribute some perspective on different pieces. But man, then you get done with it and the damn thing's like 2 fucking hours long. And you're like, what are we doing? What are we doing with some of those ones that were over 2 hours? But I think what sort of fluttered out at the end, well, obviously COVID stopped us dead in our tracks, man.
Yeah.
But, we were trying to kind of push the limits of what we could get locally, and that's difficult. And then you're having people, musicians don't, they're on the road. It's hard to get them to be like, hey, yeah, I'll come sit at your house for an hour. It's not the easiest thing to do. We did get some amazing people in a very short amount of time and produced some awesome episodes. And I hope this is a slight return to some of that and looking at different ways that we can do it. Because obviously with Zoom and some of the microphones and things like that, the tools have gotten easier. You can do things remotely and you can build stories like you've done with Galaxy Tenants.
All right. Are we good? Is everything good? Why do I keep asking that?
I don't know. You're making me nervous, man.
At the end of the day, in the twilight, when the colors collapse on the skyline, and the day has its last beat of glory, till the night steals you side and you're blind, till the morning write your regrets down and throw them away at the end of the day. And it begs you to come as you are, 'cause you are the moonlight, the sun and the stars. Take it one at a time. You will find your way at the end of the day. At the end of the day, in the twilight, when the colors collapse on the skyline, and all that you learned from your mother, pass it on for the comfort and welfare of others, and the child within never leads you astray at the end of the day. I remember the times we were golden, and forget all those nights I was burned out and broken. As the smoke finally clears, only flowers remain at the end of the day. At the end of the day. At the end of the day.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
I have to take it out of the venues and go back to when you were doing your podcast tapings in your studio and having the bands and musicians there being interviewed by you guys, and the little private concerts that we were getting out of the deal, like with Vince Herman and 10th Mountain Division, Venus Cruise. I'm trying to think who else. You had some really great ones.
The Drunken Hearts.
Yes.
We had Jason Hahn in studio. We had Luke Miller from Lotus in studio. And in studio, meaning my living room. But then we had Fruition come by.
Oh!
And that was a fun one.
Yes. Sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but that's my favorite one. That was cool. Hanging out, having some mimosas and coffee with, Fruition, just yakking about stuff, and then listening to them sing private show. Again, I love that kind of stuff. Also, speaking of Drunken Hearts, thanks to what Music Marauders has done for me and getting me to the point where I can actually get credentials to things, and I've gotten so much experience, but that's another whole thing. I got Cody Russell asked me to come into the studio when they were taping an album with Tim Carbone. This is years ago, but this was still really cool. I got to go in and take photos of them doing their whole in-studio recording thing. So I've gotten these experiences that I never ever would have had. Being able to shoot at Red Rocks, which is okay, I know when people are really into skiing, they say that that's their nirvana. Never been into skiing myself, but my nirvana is being down in the pit at Red Rocks. I don't know what it is. It's such a magical place. And to see these bands that I love that up close, and being able to take photos bring in my good equipment that I now have and invested in makes such a difference. I mean, I love that. But that day that it was a 4th of July show for Blues Traveler and Jackie Green. And I was just kind of messing around with I think I was changing lenses or something. I don't know what I was doing. And I hear all the audience going nuts. And I just look up and there's Bob Weir just standing right in front of me. I didn't know he was going to be there. No one did, I don't think. That was a cool moment because, I mean, I got to see the Dead back in the days when Jerry was in the band. So that was something I really loved. I loved how Music Marauders put on, didn't you guys put on some at Coyote's, some of his venues?
We did, yeah. We kind of co-produced some stuff there at the 21st and Lawrence location and then the 13th and near Lincoln location in Denver. That old Coyote's was really wild with the courtyard and like the stripper stage and like the weird back room. And that was just a bizarre place on 21st and Lawrence.
I've been there. That was probably one of my first ones. I think I saw the New Orleans Suspects there.
Fun.
That was awesome. But getting to see, this is the thing I love. I love seeing shows when you get the collaborations with members from different bands, which is why I love Everyone Orchestra shows as well. But I loved going to a little tiny stage and getting to see people. I saw John Popper at a Coyote's from Blues Traveler again. That's pretty cool. And they seem like they have a blast doing it too, because they're in a small, non-stressful, laid-back event, Yeah,
so. Absolutely. Those are really special moments for me too, which I think has kind of inclined me to be geared towards that super jam format. I like to take musicians from a bunch of different bands and put them together and see what happens. And that's some of my favorite stuff that I've done have been in that format. Just really like seeing musicians from big bands come together on a small stage and see what comes of it. Yeah.
That's why I got into live music, was basically going to all of the shows like that you put on and getting to do something like that. And I remember so many Drunken Heart ones. For some reason, at that point, there were a lot of ones with Andrew McConathy and a lot of other musicians coming in. And I love how these bands all support each other and get together and play. The whole scene is great. And Colorado's got a crazy live music scene.
That's what brought me here.
Yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just, if you had to pick a place for live music, and especially kind of independent live music, and then gear it more towards jam and jazz, then shit, Denver's the place to be. Funk, great bluegrass, progressive bluegrass. It's just like, it's this town that has it all.
It really does. And a lot of the musicians live here. So we get to a lot of special things too here that, because a lot of them is their hometowns.
That made my super jams easier. It saved me money on flights and hotels.
Didn't get too far, but my day is done. Can't see the stars with the TV on. No midnight owls over the sound of your crying. Side by side on a moonless night, you turn away from my embrace. Had enough of loving tough, that ain't your style. And I'm wild as the night, as the wind in the pines, as a heart on fire, wild as the night. I'm the howling wolf, I'm the midnight band, I'm the old tin roof, you're the falling rain. I'm spinning wheels on a muddy hill, you're my seatbelt on. Now don't take off, sit back down, I'll bring you love till you turn around. take it too hard. Lord knows I'm wild. I said I'm wild as the night, as the wind in the pine, as a heart on fire, wild as the night. I said I'm wild as the night, as the wind in the pine, as a heart on fire, wild as the night.
I got a question for you. We can go back a little bit because obviously you talked a little bit about why you started MusicMarauders in the first place and why it was something that became an outlet for you. But the evolution of MusicMarauders over the years has gone from live music coverage to music management at times to event promotion to a podcast a couple times, all while kind of maintaining itself as a journalistic outlet for some of the most amazing up and coming photographers and writers on this scene. Was that the plan all along, or what was the goal, you know?
Oh, man. I mean, small picture initially is, like I said, just getting into shows. And then all of a sudden I'm getting these interviews with, like, in the first year, like DJ Logic, Fareed Hawk, Del McCurry, Sam Bush. And it's like, okay, so then you start seeing the potential in what you're doing at that point. You're like, okay, I have access to literally my idols. And then all of a sudden, you know, you're sitting backstage and, you know, I watched Almost Famous at a pretty formative point in my life. And I'm not comparing what we do to that necessarily, but just to get a glimpse of that vibe, being a quote journalist, I guess, or a writer, and sitting backstage as, you know, your favorite band is doing their thing. And there was something just about it that you just kind of realize that the potential is there to do bigger things. And through those contacts, I started promoting shows and doing posters and graphics and started managing some bands because we already had an audience that we could filter this stuff out to. And it wasn't something where I'm trying to sell anything to anybody. In fact, we gave away so many free tickets and did all those ticket contests through a bunch of local venues, not even just with the venues that I was working with, but it evolved into realizing a greater potential. And then all of a sudden I started booking music festivals and had the opportunity to book some pretty cool and unique venues in Denver. And in reflecting on all of that, you know, there was no plan. It was a matter of circumstance, and the circumstances were right and they were stacked in our favor for quite a while. And you know, we rode that out, and I think of moments where I'm throwing a show and you're there, and I look around and a bunch of other Music Marauders, you know, Kevin is there and Brad and, you know, Ryan and some of the other guys. And it's just like, you know, in those moments you realize, even though there wasn't a plan, this is why we do this. This is why we did this. It built towards those moments, you know, and I have such a heavy gratitude for everything we've had the opportunity to do, from when you and I were mucking it up and, like I said, in the pits and in the lots, to standing backstage at venues and just my head exploding because of who's performing with us. And, you know, I think back to some of like the super jams we did and stuff. Seeing your favorite musicians and handpicking some of your favorite musicians to play together without an expectation of what that's going to sound like, and then actually hearing that for the first time. I mean, for me, there's nothing like that.
Yeah, it's like one of those things where it's like, if you weren't there, you know, like, because some of those super jams are like, you know, if there wasn't a recording of it, or like if you weren't at the show, like it just was like a dream in the wind, you know. It just disintegrates like right before your eyes. It's gone. One of the things that we did with MusicMarauders is in those moments try to capture that either through a quick little video or a photo or somehow, if you could, with your words, to try and like encapsulate what that was like. And I think of that as a high point too in that world. I feel like you got your legs kind of chopped out from under you with the One Up and how they kind of stopped booking music there. But it was one of those things where, dude, that is something that will go down as part of your legacy as far as I was concerned. Is because some of those super jams, dude, they were fucking unbelievable.
It's interesting because as somebody who didn't experience the whole ride of Music Marauders up and into the position that you guys are in now, or that we're in now, I guess, I know like these little snippets of things like some highlights from the story that I'm aware of. There's the throwing Kid Rock CD out the window of an RV on your way to a NASCAR event. And there is, just like, honestly, when I think about it, I have all these little tiny snippets like that, like meeting Nick Stock and I guess kind of getting the first articles out and the first coverage out and building the early relationships. I've seen clips of you interviewing the Umphrey's guys in a festival circumstance or whatever. And so I know all these little like signposts along your path. But I guess, are there things that were pivotal that people aren't aware of that you have never had a chance to speak to? Or
It's interesting, man. I was talking to Nick about this the other day, and we were talking about how Music Marauders started and why. And I was communicating basically about how broke I was at the time. So I started writing and shooting out of a necessity to be able to attend these things and interact with a lot of these musicians. And it got big quick in that first year. I was just reaching out for interviews to folks. And like I've said to Nick, like, there's no way that these guys should have taken interviews with me. But I think about moments like, I'll tell a story that I think is pivotal for me. I was living in upstate New York, broke as fuck, same scenario. And I was working in a bookstore. And I looked down at my phone and there was a text message from DJ Logic, which was a weird thing for me. And then my heart starts beating because as a kid, I really idolized what DJ Logic did in a live music setting. And so I text him back and he's like, hey, I'm going to be in your area. And I got Bernie with me tonight. We'd love to see you. And I'm like, done. Well, done. Better go start counting change. And I looked where they were at. They were playing with a project called Headtronics, which is DJ Logic. Steve Mullitz used to play in it, Freak Bass on bass. And I look and they're in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, which is like hours from me.
River Street Jazz Cafe!
Precisely. Which is nowhere near Seneca Falls, New York. So that text message was, sure not. That was a misleading text message, but it also didn't change my optics on this as far as like, okay, I'm going to meet Bernie Worrell tonight. Because I had been seeing him as a kid for years. And so I made the several-hour drive down there on fumes, putting change in my car. And that night, I got to see them in that small setting and interact with Bernie. I called my brother and had so fucking lame. I called my brother and had him talk to Bernie because my brother was a huge fan too. And Bernie was just the most kind and accommodating person in that moment. You have this kid who's just like a kid in a candy shop. I was just like, I'm hanging out with my musical hero and I'm asking him to call my brother. I'm asking him just the dumbest fucking questions.
That's charming, Justin. Don't beat yourself up on that. That's a good dude being excited about what he's seeing. That's awesome.
Fair. I appreciate that perspective. So I did end up interviewing them and it was really cool. And as I was getting ready to leave that night and make this several-hour drive back to Seneca Falls, Bernie asked for my phone number because he wanted to stay in touch. And I'm like, man, this dude's just being nice. It's great. Like, this was my moment with my idol. And then as I'm like walking out in the dark and getting in my car, and it was all just, I can picture it in my head. I can see the shadows on the ground. I can see the vivid experience that I had. And I got in my car and I drove home. And maybe a week later, I looked down at my phone and it says Wizard of Woo. And because that's what I put him in my phone as, of course.
Sure.
And it was Bernie Worrell. And that kicked off our friendship of me helping him do some social media stuff, me booking more shows with him. I've had a chance to put him in super jams with, guys like O'Teal Burbridge, and to be able to get to know Bernie and to be able to get to know my musical hero was just the greatest pleasure of my life. And then watching him walk around my wedding and my aunts and uncles are talking to him, or my dad and my brother or whatever, it's just like, that shit's not real. You know,
yeah, I do.
Then you start thinking we're definitely in a simulation.
Yep, for sure. That's not even the most compelling evidence.
That's true, bud. But when I started this whole thing, man, it was such a surface idea of like just show coverage and like interviews, some band features, and then it blossomed into this thing with more people and covering these festivals, and the festivals just would open their arms to us, which was crazy. But I do think that we came along, especially in like 2010, on a wave of true independent events happening, and like independent media in that realm was still taking shape on some level. Not that there've been people around since the 90s, 2000s, but it was the first wave of like new websites that were doing coverage in that realm.
Sure. It's finally not just relics, right?
Yeah, that's kind of it. Yeah, you started having these offshoots of all these other wonderful publications and not so wonderful publications, if we're being honest. I mean, a lot of
all of the above.
Wook rags, Yeah. But we were on the front end of that, and I'm grateful for everything that we've experienced.
Yeah, man. I mean, we were never going to get rich off of, at least not the blog part.
We're sure as fuck not going to get rich if you keep calling it a blog.
That's right. That's right. It's a digital publication. But yeah, man, I'm kind of flipping through some of the old, dude. I mean, I got my wife. I remember because when I met you, I had just gotten my hands on my first mirrorless camera. They called them evil cameras back in the days. Electronic viewfinder interchangeable lens. So it's just, I had my Sony NEX3. I ended up going through a couple of those, and then the 1000 line and whatever. And finally, I'm full frame shooter now. But you go back and look at some of these photos where I got my wife to sneak that NEX into the show. Like, honey, put this lens in your bra. It's okay. It's okay.
It's like, hey, dear band, can we shoot your show? No? Okay.
No, okay.
I'm still going to shoot your show.
Still going to probably try to shoot your show. Still going to piss off somebody in like the 15th row as I drunkenly trudge up there to go and take some pictures.
Excuse me.
Sorry. Just trying to take a photo. I like this band a lot.
I use a 50 millimeter lens for most of my work.
Why?
I got comfortable with it. I don't know how to describe it. I would use different lenses. I would use zoom lenses, and I would just always keep with the 50. And it's what I knew. It was what I was comfortable with. And I found out that's what I got my best shots with. So I was just stuck with that.
We're at a point now where I feel like our perspective is respectful, honest, direct, and it feels more refined than it had in previous years,
Yeah, I believe that. And you've expanded the palette of artists within the Music Marauder. I mean, I've, being in the back room of the groups on Facebook where we discuss all of the things that are happening, I see new names coming in. I see fantastic work coming in from these names. Some of them, I've had an opportunity to meet, like Brandon
Johnson. Isn't Brandon Johnson's work incredible?
Fantastic, man. Yeah. Fantastic. And, I've only met him once. I think he came to one of the Music Marauders podcast things very briefly. Super nice guy. And man, his photography is just unique and inspiring and crisp and beautiful, and he's not the only one, obviously. I mean, Nancy and obviously Nick. Mm-hmm. I mean, just so many very, very talented people.
A lot of your posters, actually, probably from shows that you...
Oh, yeah, I see some I recognize. There we go. Cool.
Because Kyle would always grab the posters off the walls at venues and frame them.
I
told you, we're really into live music.
That's awesome. I appreciate that about you. Your work and your personality has always just kind of oozed passion, and it's just this wonderful thing to witness and to be a part of. And I'm just endlessly grateful to have one of my favorite photographers contributing to Music Marauders and to see all of the incredible work and to be a catalyst for sharing that out. You could choose anybody to feature your work with, and you choose us, and that is not lost on me how important that is and how amazing that is for us.
Well, I wouldn't have even gotten anywhere if it weren't for you and Music Marauders.
I'd like to suggest that if it weren't for Music Marauders, it would have been some other path forward for you in a similar fashion, just because your work is so good, your eye is so keen, and your output is
much.
just consistent. So
Thank you.
if it wasn't Music Marauders, we just came along at a good time, honestly.
Yeah, but the thing is, because of you, I was able to get the experience I needed and upgrade my equipment, because I never would have been able to bring in a good camera to the venues in the first place. So it's been a great growth thing for me, but my loyalty will always be to Music Marauders, because you guys were there for me when I was taking in my $50 point and shoot.
We've had some awesome times, and I'm really grateful for your friendship and your contributions and who you are as a human. Like I said, I consider you a brother, so thank you for everything.
Dude, I mean, and I've told you this before, you've made me the most cynical music fan on the face of the earth. However,
I'm sorry.
I appreciate you so much. You know that, and I love you.
Thanks, buddy. Love you too.
It's something to be proud of, Justin. You should seriously you should sit in that. You should sit in that and feel it, because
there's been a lot of crying for me recently, but I'll have to tell you, through these conversations, you talk to somebody for an hour that's been contributing for 10 or 15 years, and it's like, man, the impact of everything collectively has really hit me like a freight train of emotion.
Heck yeah, buddy. I'm happy to be on the trip with you, brother.
It's one of the greatest pleasures of my life to know you and to have you on the trip, bud. I'm so grateful for you.
Meeting friends along the way that you've met, 10 years ago, running into random jam bass people, being at fucking Monte Green and watching Murray walk by fucking 15 feet away from you, just crossing paths with all the same people. Like it hits the spot.
It's interesting because it's like the circus going town to town, and the same characters are going to be there.
There's Al Space with his bubble machine. Hey, Al,
Your local senator.
Your local senator spinning away. I don't know. There's so many shows. It's hard to keep up. I went through my archives today, seeing if I could come up with a number, but I've shot at least over 500 shows that are on my hard drive.
That's crazy. That's a lot of shows. Most people won't see that many shows in their life.
Yeah, there were a couple of years where I shot over 100 shows, especially when I lived in Seattle. I would get on a bus 2 different times in a night and hop to 3 different clubs. Yeah.
It goes back to the core of why I started doing this in the first place, which was to share the show with the people that couldn't be there, and that was always a big driving factor, especially going and covering festivals and trying to share that from a ground level experience perspective, and sometimes successful, sometimes not. But I think I always felt like that was a big driving force early on. I just like to keep going to shows, I guess, and writing about it. So it's been a good outlet for me over the years, for sure.
Well, I'm grateful for all your contributions, all of your years of friendship, your moments of being such a fucking character. And I have such a high regard for you, man. And I'm grateful for our friendship.
Well, I appreciate it, Jay. I feel the same way, man. And I know, especially as we get older and have kids and all the things that go along with that, we don't get to as many shows as we used to, but we should definitely make it a point this year to go catch a few for sure.
Just the last final thing. Have I shown you my Fat Flog blog tattoo?
No. You haven't? Oh, that's too bad.
You're
That's
the best,
great.
dude. I appreciate
That's awesome.
you, man. I always love doing this shit, and I love making content with you.
Yeah, man, the same. Let's make some shit this year. I got some time.
Can you talk about the future of Yarmony?
We are actively pursuing new location and new festival dates, and we hope to have an update for you guys very soon. We made a call to action. I want to say it was October, maybe. As I mentioned earlier, we knew we weren't going back to Rancho well before the event this past June. I want to say it was probably like June 1st. I knew that this was going to be the last one. Drunken Hearts even tailored our set to, as we were the last band, we made sure that we made a statement with the last couple songs that we played. And, it's a tough situation because I do love those guys so much and I appreciate Rancho so much. But, I guess just, it was time. The relationship wasn't working out and the dates weren't working out. Being in June out there, the water's really cold, the water's really high, can't really do the floating stage. We kind of just reached a point where it was best to go our separate ways. So yeah, we made a call to action in October to ask our fan base where they thought we should go. You guys know us better than anybody else. I think I know who I am, but I only know who I think I am on the inside. I can't tell you how you see me or how you see the festival. And we got a lot of really, really, really great responses, tagged venues and people all over the state. We got a lot of interest from Chaffee County and Salida in that area. We got some interest from some venues even farther down the Colorado River in the Debec area. We got some interest from places that have no water at all and just, hey, come build a festival here. And for me, coming out of whatever it is, 12 years at Rancho Del Rio and having done the festival 16 times now, I think, we want infrastructure. When I started the event, we all wanted to go camp on the Colorado River without cell service for 3 days because we were, 25. And now we're older than that. A lot of us have kids and you don't necessarily want to sleep on the ground or get woken up at 5 a.m. by a drum circle when you're trying to sleep in your tent with your kids. And so we didn't really have the ability to separate those things at Rancho. We could always try to make a family camping area, but ultimately you're going to be 50 yards away from the crazies. So there's not really anything you can do.
As I've gotten older, I do have something to admit. This year I did camp and family camping, and I do not have kids.
Nice. Well, you're smart. Yeah, you're smart. At least be proactive about it, so that I haven't woken up in that field in a very long time, but I certainly can tell you what it feels like.
For sure. That cold air coming off the river is like the water is flowing down. And then, yeah, like I said, we camped in family camp.
Breathing in your tent.
For sure. We camped in family camp, though, just for a little bit of quiet. Like you said, you're still like 50 feet away from the fucking wooks, but it's a little bit of a shield.
Yeah, so the exciting news is we found some options for the event, and we're pursuing them. I would anticipate having hotels and restaurants, a body of water nearby, a floating stage, and more infrastructure than we've ever had. So it's exciting. An increased capacity significantly, over 3 times as big as we've ever been out there at Rancho, and still technically on the Colorado River, hopefully. So stay tuned.
No matter where you book it, no matter who you book, we will be there.
That's great to hear. As a business, we have been doing this for a very long time, and to think that we're in our 16th or 17th year and moving venues is a little bit of a daunting task. But as a business, we want to continue. We see the value in bringing our festival to life and keeping it alive. And you might see a little bit of branding changes depending on where we end up, but it'll still be Yarmony.
Yeah, I can't wait to see that community again. I'm really grateful for you still seeing this vision through, because I think even through the progress and some of the challenges, this is one of the most valuable things to me in my life. So thank you.
Well, I've thought long and hard about just abandoning everything and getting a real job. So we're trying to avoid that.
I think of all these things for me, and it's cumulative. It adds up to you being, one of my best friends and one of the people I respect most. And watching the growth from you playing with the Lee Boys through to the Colorado Get Down and selling out clubs in Colorado and playing with these big names. You know, I've seen you play with the Allman Brothers Band, which is my favorite band of all time.
Man. Yeah, we've been through it.
And now you're playing with Jelly Roll. And I wonder if you ever saw anything like this coming down the line for you, and then also what that experience is like.
I did not. That I didn't, man. You know what's wild, man. I was told by someone that my path, like, eventually would bring me to this arena playing with a big artist like this. I was told that back in like 2008 by like a person that just kind of just foretold me stuff. I mean, but of course that's back then. I would not think like, you know, like I would end up playing with one of the biggest artists that we have of like our time, not only playing, but being the MD as well, which is a huge milestone. You know, that's a huge step.
Tell people what that means, what the term, what MD stands for.
That's the musical director for this artist, which is a big thing, you know. It's been life changing, man, you know, like in all good ways, man. But I've never would have thought I would have been able to be here just because of the fact that I'm such a jammer guy, you know. That's my roots, is that, you know, which it would not ever be, you know. But this guy, like, is a good guy, you know, like he stands for everything that's right, everything that's real, I should say. And this is off camera, not even on camera. I'm not even talking about on camera, just off camera, you know. He stands for everything that's real. And, you know, that really resonates. And so playing with him was easy, you know, like it came natural, it came easy. More like other outlaw stuff, you know. But man, his message is hope, you know, and his message is for not like all of the rich people. Not it's just the everyday working person, you know, like, you know, the people that's out there getting out your trash, you know, the people that's at the gas station, you know, the people that's wearing like a safety vest, you know, saying stop, go, stop, you know. But it's just the everyday working folks, you know. It's just been like going here from here after the era of us doing like all of these jams and like, you know, just making a name. It just kept on going up and up. Before this, you know, I mean, I was already busy with like, you know, like all of my stuff, just like touring on my own overseas with other bands. I was totally booked. I was already really busy. And like, I didn't need that really, but something said do it, and yes, and it was just the right call, like at the right time. And so it's just been going here. And it's so good to have a guy like you that watched me grow from not just us, but prior with the Lee Boys, you know, just watch the growth just keep on going here and here and here. You know, dude, man, that's the power like of music, brother.
It's crazy on my end. I'm seeing a guy who used to crash in my basement. On the Tonight Show and on Howard Stern, having a conversation with Howard Stern. It's really a trip, man. It's been one of the greatest pleasures of my life to watch the growth that you've undergone musically and as a human and throughout your career. And it's just endlessly inspiring.
Oh, dude, bro, let's talk about the basement crashing, bro. Listen, dude, man, the basement crashes, dude, you already knew it. Like, don't book me no room. No, I'm in the basement, please.
We did that for a while, man. Budgets were tight. Yeah. And it's like we did what we had to do, man, to get through and to get those shows. And I remember Carly was booking like $50, $40 hotel rooms with us for us with her discount and stuff.
Oh, dude, for real. Like, listen, man, it was a circle, you know, like everybody was working it, you know, everybody was working it like every angle because of the fact that we had something going and we believed in it. You know, and man, it was so good for that era too. And then not only us, but then just to watch other bands come and ask you to book them, or like, you know, like other bands ask you, yo, what spot are you booking? You know, I want to play that, you know, dude, that was a whole other thing that was happening, you know?
Yeah, man.
So, man, good, Jesus Christ, good times, dude.
Good times for sure. And look at you now, you're in the biggest band in the world. One of.
Yeah, man. Listen, man, it's cool. It is so cool. But what's even more, you know, like it's even better, man, just to be able to come and hang with you and like, you know, just like, you know, talk the mess like this and knowing that if I'm in town that we finna go and get some grub, a kitchen sink is on the way,
Biscuits and gravy's on the menu, my friend, and if it's not, we're at the wrong place.
Yeah, biscuits and gravy's is on the top of the list, without a doubt,
I really appreciate you, buddy. You mean the world to me. Thank you.
Dude, listen, anytime I told you, man, don't ever ask me, man. I felt some type of way, Justin. You go ask me this. I was like, dude, I don't care what time it is. Let me get up and brush my teeth. Man, Justin, thanks a lot, man. I love you,
buddy.
Guys.
Yeah, I love you too, man. With Murray from the last Yarmony, and I got an interview with KK from the barbecue stand.
Are you serious?
Yeah, bro. I'll include that in this.
You got an interview with Murray and KK
at the same time, and it was
okay. Listen, dude, just real quick. My first encounter with Murray is through our good friend Josh. Josh threw my first show over there, and of course they're all. Let me get this right. They're all fish heads? No.
Yeah, they're all fish fans for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. That's well played.
All right, so listen, what I'm saying? I had no clue, right? This is my first show with Josh. Dude's a good guy. So, what I'm saying? After the show, we're back at his house. This is 1 o'clock in the morning. Everybody's over there watching fish. you know? I mean, it's packed. I'm up like, yo, okay, this is happening. The show is over, but we are at his house. 2 o'clock in the morning, they still jamming. 3 o'clock in the morning, I was like, okay, let me go outside. I go outside, walk at the corner and grab me like a sandwich from the store. It's packed outside. This is my first time, like, you know what I'm saying, in the city. I come back, there's a guy outside playing Frisbee at 3:30 in the morning. And I'm up like, is somebody throwing a Frisbee with the light on it? And he pointed at me and throw it to me. I'm up like, oh, this is happening. I said, oh, of course, you know what I'm saying? So I put my food down, I throw the Frisbee back. Dude, we are playing Frisbee for about 10 or 15 minutes in the streets with these cars by, and we are a ball. That was my first introduction at Murray, was playing Frisbee at like 3:30 a.m. in the streets of New York. In the morning, bro. I'm like, what the heck is happening? And then ever since then, he's been like, you know, the big pro. And then, you know, knowing Murray, you know, like everybody. And then, of course, you know, figured out that y'all know each other, you know, like y'all like best friends and stuff like that. So Murray, like, is the man.
I think that description of you playing Frisbee with Murray in the streets is a uniquely Murray story. And little did we know that years later that we would meet, and he introduced Carly and I. He officiated my wedding, and he traveled. He's hit the road with us, you know.
Bro, so Murray is the guy that's in the middle of everybody I see. You know, that's the crossroads right there. We all love him. I love him.
Very true. I love him. Yeah. That's Saint Murray is what we call him.
Saint Murray. That's what it is, man.
like a matador, of course. She's an East Coast mama now, I know that for sure. I'm going down for the third time, going down for the third. Down, 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 down. Swollen tongue, wealth in the skies, and the siren song sweetly sucks me down to the ocean blue. Find my way back, rip up all my limbs, work out both my eyes, pull out my swollen tongue, wealth in the skies, and the siren song will sweetly suck me down to the ocean blue. I'll find my way back to you, find my way back to you.
This episode is dedicated to all of the folks who've contributed to Music Marauders over the years, to my family for their endless support, to my wife who stuck through the peaks and valleys of my time in the music industry, and of course, this episode is dedicated to St. Murray. This has been a presentation of Galaxy Tenants and Music Marauders.
Someone was making fun of me saying, I love hot tubs all the way down to a Motel 6.
That's a tough sell, but I've been there.
And I was like, what? Where did I get into a Motel 6 hot tub? Sure, I did at some point.